Lawyers of Reddit. What's the worst way you've seen a person screw over someone else in court, whether it be criminal, civil, or divorce proceedings? Prosecutor here. I showed up for a bond hearing one morning and the defendant asked the judge if he could say something. The first words out of his mouth were, "Heyo judge, look, the reason I hit her was because she disrespected me." He did not prevail. Not the worst, but one that sticks out. Woman shows up to a court in a "It's party time bitches, drink up" t-shirt. She was there for her first appearance on a third DUI charge. Judge was not in a humorous mood that day. I've seen a parent use non-existent discipline as a tool to win over their teenage child so that the child will choose to live with said rubbish parent, and rubbish parent will receive child support from the other parent. It boils my blood seeing someone allowing their 15-year-old child to drop out of school, get high every day, buy them drugs, alcohol, just about every negative thing you could do to a kid, just so they don't have to pay $100 in child support a month. Not my case, but still my favorite story. Dude screwed himself over when he went to a jury trial for a burglary charge and wore the same distinct sweatshirt he wore the night he committed the crime. Kind of hard to argue the guy in the video isn't your client at that point. Needless to say, he was convicted and spent a few years in DOC. One time I saw an indignant defendant who was in custody tell the judge his public defender wasn't working hard enough and he wanted the judge to appoint different counsel. The judge asked him what specifically was the problem and he said, "I don't want a female lawyer, I need a man who can take charge and fight for me," or something very similar to that. The judge, also female, said that's not how it works. Then he started yelling and getting into specifics about his public defender, just mainly, "I don't like her, she won't visit me," etc. The judge is annoyed and looks at him and is like, "Fine, I'll appoint another attorney for you, but because you are not satisfied with your attorney and I need time to appoint you to new counsel, I am not going to hear any other issues today and will reset your case." A few days later, the judge sends defendant notice of his new appointed attorney, who happens to also be a female, and notice of the case were set for 6 weeks. The case was originally set for a bond hearing and the DA and his PD had agreed to release him on an unsecured bond, meaning he would have gotten out that day if he hadn't thrown his temper tantrum. Instead, he waited another 6 weeks in jail just to have another female attorney represent. Was involved in a custody case where a wife cheated on her husband and had a child as a result. She let husband believe the child was his until she was about 5 years old and they were divorcing. To stop him from getting custody, she convinced the biological father to try to get custody, thinking that if he won, she would wind up with the child. Became a huge three-way fight, multiple sets of grandparents involved. Attorney's fees skyrocketed because the case would have been pretty quick otherwise. She couldn't pay her attorney, tried to get the bio dad to, got even messier, etc. Basically, there still isn't an agreement all parties will follow. They are in and out of court every year or so. She screwed herself. There's a lawyer in my town who has a reputation for being a real dick. He left a very successful firm to go off on his own. He and the firm negotiated which clients he would take and how eventual fees from those clients would be divided. All seemed fine and dandy. As soon as he's out the door, he sues his old firm saying the deal is unenforceable and that he should cover 100% of the fees from clients who came with him. He lost and appealed, lost again and appealed to the state of Supreme Court where they shut his ass down, and in extreme diplomatic language pretty much called him a dick. Had a criminal jury trial for misdemeanor criminal mischief over 4 years ago. State filed charges and kept amending the information to the point where they left the actual victim out of the trial and proceeded with the 2 eyewitnesses. Well, one of the witnesses was my client's ex and the other witness was the ex's new girlfriend. They claimed my client vandalized the actual victim's car. Client denied everything. Well, apparently the state and both witnesses had no idea that the ex had an outstanding warrant for not paying child support to my client, which created a motive for him to lie. Asked him if he was aware that he had a warrant out for his arrest on the stand. He didn't know. The judge excused the jurors. The bailiffs arrested the ex on the stand. State rested. Judge granted our motion for judgment of acquittal because we had good case law for the victim not being there. Client walked away free and the ex went to jail. Not court, but it is legal adjacent. My dad is an executive safety officer at the company he works at, and one of the company's truck drivers got into an accident. The driver wasn't at fault, but it's the company's policy anytime a driver gets into an accident, they drug test them the same day, and when the results came back, the guy failed the test. The guy disputed the results, so they had him retake it. When he finishes up in the testing facility's bathroom, the sample he gives them isn't warm at all, clearly hadn't just come out of his person. And in the bathroom, which they meticulously clean between each test, they find a strip of tape and like a little vial and cap thing that would have went onto a small vial kind of container. So my dad has to be on a conference call with the driver and his manager and some other relevant parties, and the guy maintains is innocent. And they can't like conclusively prove the tape or cap means he cheated the test. So they're kind of at an impasse. As they're getting off the call, my father just kind of takes a shot and asks the driver really nonchalantly and in passing, "Say, doesn't taping the vial to your leg hurt? Like, how did you get it off?" And the fucking guy replies without missing a beat, "Oh no, it was just painter's tape, comes off easy, didn't hurt at all." There was like 5 seconds of dead air after that before the guy scrambled and tried to put the toothpaste back in the tube. The company was able to fire him without any trouble. Lady brought a frivolous case to get out of a contract she signed. She lost, then sued the attorney and the witnesses for conspiring against her. They got her case dismissed and an award of attorney's fees which she refused to pay. Lawyer recorded it as a lien on her house and scheduled a foreclosure sale, which caused her mortgage lender to declare a default and accelerate entire mortgage balance. Lawyer made a side deal with lender to pay them all proceeds of the sale and then sold her house on courthouse steps to highest bidder, and then arranged for sheriff to forcibly eject her onto the street with her shit. She's homeless now. Not someone else, but himself. The guy and his lawyer missed court appearances, sometimes one of them, sometimes both, with little or no warning, and with suspect excuses. It started getting ridiculous and we kept pointing out holes in his story, like he said he left for another country without knowing about the appearance, but his lawyer stood in court and said he told him beforehand. Or all of a sudden he was in a former Soviet bloc country for fertility treatments and it would ruin everything if he came back now. Or when he was visiting dying relatives on another continent. Or he was going to the airport when he had to rush to the hospital and showed us an admitting form in another language that we translated. It showed he was there, but also that he was discharged. He also tried firing his attorney and saying he needed more time to brief a new attorney, who at the next appearance would say he hasn't been able to talk to his client so he needs to adjourn. Or that he hasn't been paid and that his client is basically an ass and he needs to be relieved. We keep saying to the judge he was doing it to stall, but the judge kept giving him the benefit of the doubt. We even showed him other cases where he skipped appearances and the judges threatened sanctions. Until finally he didn't show up for an appearance where the judge had specifically told him, "I don't care if you're meeting with the Pope, I'm ordering you to be here." Boom. His answer was stricken. Default judgment in full was granted to our side. Neither he nor his lawyer showed up for the hearing, where the judge determined exactly how much of a judgment we should get, and then had the nerve to file a motion that the judgment was unfair because he didn't get a chance to dispute anything. Used to work in children's court representing parents. When I first started, I witnessed another attorney destroy any chance of their client getting their kids back. At a review hearing assessing whether the court should terminate parental rights, the attorney was so confused about what was happening that they requested unmonitored visits for the client, but didn't even address termination of rights. Needless to say, the court terminated the client's parental rights. The worst part was that earlier that day, the court took up a petition for more time, but denied it after the attorney failed to make any argument. Based on the facts, parent was doing really well. They probably would have won. The second worst part was overhearing the attorney tell her client to come back for the next review hearing, finalizing the adoption. Not only would there be nothing the parent could do at that hearing, but terminated parents aren't even allowed to be there. This wasn't my case, but I followed it closely because it was an acquaintance divorce proceedings. He and his now ex-wife shared some commercial property that was worth some dough. They were both on the paperwork / had access to the same info. Well, some shit hit the fan and the property was in arrears and I think some lien had been filled. The husband would try to talk to his then wife about the whole thing and she would blow him off. Not only would she ignore him and the finances, she started cheating on him. Fast forward to divorce, it's contentious and they get down to fighting for the primary residence house market. Whose market value, unencumbered, is much less than the commercial building. She demanded the house and the husband effectively offered to give her the commercial building if he could keep the residence. She never paid attention to how bad off the commercial building was, and for some strange reason, her lawyer didn't do any due diligence, so they took the deal. I don't know if the asset allocation included any saving conditions or caveats for the ex-wife, but I did like to see that her own disinterest may have led to bargaining for an underwater property instead of a paid-off house. Defendant trying to overturn default judgment claims person process server served wasn't him, couldn't possibly be him, etc. at hearing. At hearing, process server testifies he clearly recognizes defendant there in court 2 years later because defendant physically threatened him at time of service. Made himself pretty memorable. Oh, and process server was sure he served the right guy because at time of service he had a photo of defendant which my client had helpfully sourced on mugshots.com. Not a lawyer, but a friend properly screwed over his ex-wife. He thought things were not going well. She seemed off. He did a little digging and saw enough to prove she was cheating. He hired a private detective. The detective got pics of her kissing a dude, going to his house, plus the cell phone call log, credit card statements, etc. Then, she asked for a divorce and claims he's being unfaithful. She claims she has been nothing but a loving wife, yet provides no proof he is cheating. He pulls out a 3-inch binder with a couple-month log, photos of her going into restaurants with her boyfriend, pictures kissing him in the parking lot, pictures of her car at his place, text log, etc, etc, etc. Both married people had equally high-paying jobs. She wanted to take him to the ringer. He threw out some offer like $25K cash and nothing else. No retirement funds, no house, to child support, etc. Plus, he wanted the kids. Basically, take $25K and walk, bitch. Her lawyer told her she better take it, and she did. I know a girl who had a kid with someone, and when he decided he didn't want to be with her and just co-parent, went ballistic with fake abuse, rape, drug accusations, etc. She was even able to get his new girlfriend to dump him, but she made the mistake of texting about how she was lying and it was all for revenge about 200 times, saying things like, hey, you should get a protective order on him too. They can't prove if you're lying and just say you think your life is in danger. They always give it to women. His new girlfriend got scared and finally realized how fucked this all was and gave the text and everything to his lawyer. The day they read them out loud to her in court was supposedly pretty spectacular, but nothing happened to her, and he still lost thousands in legal fees, spent a couple nights in jail, and months without his kid just to get to that point. There's enough real violence and abuse out there. People lying hurts real victims more than anyone else. Sitting waiting for my client and the judge is giving a mass colloquy for an alternative program on a DUI, basically probation. Question: has anyone consumed alcohol or taken drugs in the last 24 hours? Obvious answer aside, one dude proudly raises his hand. I smoked some dope last night. He did not get probation.
Not a lawyer, but my auntie's, friend of my dad's story. She has been divorced 3 times, last 2 from the same guy. The first time she divorced her second husband, she just wanted out immediately, and of course got screwed over for a lot of money and child support for her 2 daughters. Of course, she wasn't going to let that happen again. On the second divorce, she hired a very smart lawyer, and since the ex was asking for photographs and any memories from the kids, they had another one during the second marriage. This guy told my auntie to pack all she could and put it in a storage unit. He wasted a lot of time and money trying to get the rights of that storage unit. I think my auntie got like $5 grand for that. On the divorce, only to find out that while there were photographs in there, it wasn't all of them. The lawyer split the amount and put the rest in another storage unit. Of course, my auntie knew all of it and dragged this stupid guy for even more time and money. If I ever get divorced, I want that lawyer. In the city where I am, City Hall and the courthouse is at the same building. Smoking was no longer allowed inside anyone's office and not openly allowed in the building at all. So this kid, 2 years ahead of me, was working a summer internship under a judge's office / chambers. I've met the kid, and I wasn't there to witness the accident, but I got it from someone who was there in person, and another professor confirmed it. The great equalizer is addiction, and when you're a judge with a smoking habit, you don't want to go outside in the summer to sweat. You smoke in the same place as the janitor, the security officer, the secretary, and the student interns. And this place in the building hall was in the bottom of an indoor fire escape that the cops, mayor, city council, and everyone else has understood to be the unofficial smoking area because it was 100% illegal to have an official smoking area. So this senior judge was in the unofficial smoking area by himself, feeding his addiction. In walks the kid on the internship, and the kid was being sort of a jerk, sort of on the spectrum, very stupid, and definitely a busybody that likes to get into business that was not of his own. He grabs the judge's cigarettes and puts it out on the ground and tells the judge, no smoking in this building. This was on a Tuesday afternoon, and the judge figured out who the kid was, and the kid was escorted out of the building middle of Thursday. The law is relatively small number of people working, and it is not big enough to make a judge mad for you to continue to make a living in the same town. So that kid screwed himself out of practicing law in this major metropolitan area. I work in workers' comp for the defense side, and one of our biggest issues I saw come up was a guy who had lost his daughter a few years back and was obviously not doing very well over it. He had threatened 3 other people at his job, and apparently told his workers' comp insurance covered psychiatrist that he had considered bringing a gun to work once because he felt like his coworkers were ganging up on him. They had alleged he was threatening them at work. He iterated this had been more than a year ago, and his friend talked him down, and he hadn't considered it since. So, I think the psychiatrist didn't feel there was an immediate believable danger, somehow. Naturally, the defense had access to this information, and the discussion I was privy to involved whether it was safe for us to bring up this man's mental instability as a way to discredit his case, or that bringing up that he lost his daughter would get him sympathy from the judge. There was not a momentary discussion of ethics bringing up a man's dead daughter that he was obviously traumatized about in front of court. Beyond that, none of them seemed even remotely concerned that his mental instability might retaliate for basically weaponizing his trauma against him. Child Protective Investigator. I had a client who wanted to emancipate herself from our family. She was an entitled brat, wanted to live with her drug-dealing boyfriend. Judge began asking her for pay stubs, plans, documents for said plans, access to transportation, etc. The brat had none of that figured out. Court ordered her to give up her phone to prevent access to the drug dealers, and court ordered to get a job, make plans to rent an apartment on her own, everything she wanted. If not, she would be housed in DJJ, as her parents could no longer take care of her after she beat and attempted to hurt them multiple times. She didn't last 5 minutes under her court order after telling the judge he didn't understand and he was being mean. Upon her release from DJJ, she was still court ordered to do everything in order to emancipate herself. The judge was not having it that day. Not my case, but happened to a friend. A criminal defendant freaked out in jail and did not want to appear at the sentencing hearing. I guess he did not want the bad news of how many years in prison he was going to get. So he took off his clothes in the jail cell and refused to get dressed. He apparently thought this would delay his sentencing. Judge had him hauled into court naked and sentenced him. I don't think the defendant received the benefit of any doubts.